Hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Rodrigo Gonsalves. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here. And I know this is a pre-recorded lecture, and I would like to just apologize for not being there with all of you to get your comments, to get your questions, and to make this into proper conversation. Nonetheless, I hope that you feel comfortable enough to talk to me about it later on. There's my email. You can also send questions to Cindy. And let me just take the opportunity to thank you, Cindy Zeiher, for this opportunity and for this invitation. And this is a very special moment for me. I really, really like to talk to students from University of Canterbury. You always have so many interesting comments and questions, and I hope that this presentation is interesting enough and that you all enjoy it, seeing it and hearing it as much as I did preparing it for every one of you. So let me just start by introducing myself. My name is Rodrigo Gonsalves. I am, I'm Brazilian. I'm a psychoanalyst. Also, I have a PhD background in my background. I have a academic background, right? So I got a PhD in philosophy from the European Graduate School. I'm also a PhD candidate at the University of São Paulo, where I'm working on this doctoral thesis on clinical psychology, and I'm working with psychoanalysis right now. I'm a psychoanalyst, so that's what I do for a living. I'm also a researcher at the University of São Paulo. I work translating, also as a teacher, uh, researcher. I'm a writer, and there are a couple of things which I already published. It's more of a fun fact at this point, but I think it's a relevant one concerning the fact that we will be talking about it. But I was one of the translators of Mark Fisher. The book Capitalist Realism I translated to Portuguese. So this is why I suggested as a reference, bibliographical reference for this lecture today, because I think it's a work which resonates to you from New Zealand, but also to us here in Brazil. And it also talks a bit about the reality of Europe. So if we can find a common ground between so many different locations, maybe we should pay attention to what we share. And this is actually one of the things which I hopefully will be able to address during this lecture. So this is a case study on politics, theology, and culture in Brazil. We will be investigating basically a new religious branch which was created to a certain extent. I can use this term. It was invented here in Brazil because it has different nuances from its previous formulations in terms of religion. And it has everything to do with being a part of a poor peripheral country concerning where the rich countries are. Um, so there is something about this specific religion which we will discuss. And let me just start it out with a little bit of a disclaimer when we're talking about religion. So we're talking about theology, we're talking about religion as a whole, not about religious people, right? So this is not a matter of persecution, it's not a matter of pointing fingers, it's not about individuals, it's much more about religion itself. It's about religion per se, and some of the social political implications that some branches have, especially in countries with the similar geopolitical atmosphere and structure that we have here in Brazil, right? And to a certain extent, this is relevant because it also resonates with a little bit of what this religion attempts to do in many different countries all over the world. And this can perhaps resonate with the role of religion itself in culture and in society. And maybe this is something that you can also find it interesting when you take a closer look to New Zealand and what happens in New Zealand. Of course, I'm not a specialist in New Zealand. I'm not even daring to say that I am, but I believe that as we were a colony of an European country. Um, we, in order to establish ourselves as a country in the way that we know today, we experienced a very difficult, severe obliteration of our indigenous population. So it was a history of colonization which was brutal, to say the least, about our original people from our land. And I think that maybe this is something that we can find a certain common ground, and maybe this also resonates with something which remains of our history, and this mark which is not necessarily fully symbolically subsumed, not fully symbolically resolved, can be repressed, and it becomes somewhat, although visible to a certain extent, invisible or normalized. And there are implications when things like that take place. So this is how I would like to start this presentation. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I did preparing it, and let's go. So just a couple of information about Brazil. I hope I'm not tedious, okay? Try to get this part done as quickly as possible, but I think it's important, especially because there are a few idiosyncrasies about this country which are relevant for us in order to move on, right? So first of all, we're dealing with a country which has continental dimensions, right? Brazil is a fairly big country. We're talking about the largest country in both South America and Latin America, with this little peculiarity about it, which is the fact that we, oh, and by the way, sorry for my accent, right? If things get complicated, you can follow the slides. I'm following them as well, as you can see. But if you got questions or things don't become clear, just let me know. I'll try to answer you by email as quickly as possible, okay? But well, let's go back to our point. So Brazil, it's enormous as a country, right? So we're talking about 8.5 million square kilometers, which is enormous. The population is enormous as well. We're talking about 203 million people or around that, and we're talking about the fifth largest country by area and the seventh most populous one. So another element which makes it very hard when we're dealing with Brazilian economics and Brazilian politics is the fact that we are enormous, right? Although we work as unity, or we have this unitary government, right? We are not separated by different federations or anything like that, right? So we work as a whole, as a country, right? Similar to New Zealand in that matter, different from the US, for example, but nonetheless, we do have a very open and clear disparity concerning rich states and poor states. This has everything to do with the history of Brazil itself, because there are a large density of forests in a lot of places which are to be preserved, and we are struggling that those places are preserved right now, and we're doing the best effort that we can to actually keep that as it is. But this also comes with the fact that there are large cities here in Brazil, right? And where capital actually already operates, and this was historically established, and this disparity forced a lot of people from poor states to move to rich states trying to find a better living, and this also may turn this um, economical symptom into a reality that we face nowadays, right? So the best smart political decisions to fix this economical problem or were never actually dealt with properly, right? So this is one of the key issues that we deal nowadays. But well, that's one of the many points that we might touch upon. But I'm not going into detail right now on this matter. But yes, we need to preserve our forests here in Brazil, and we are just leaving the far right government, which decimated a lot of the land that we had, that were being somewhat complicit to the brutalization of indigenous people. So there is a lot of issues that took place recently concerning the politics here in Brazil. Right now, we're moving towards a center-left government again, and this is where we are trying to push more progressive agendas and trying to uh, introduce a more socialized perspective of redistribution of wealth for everybody. But this is right now just an attempt more than something that is actually taking place, especially because the damage that was done was a very severe one, and we are still trying to fix a lot of what has happened in the past 6 years or so. Well, that being said, let's go back to our historical elements of this country and why it's important to think about religion as a core element of Brazil. So, being a Portuguese colony, Portugal was very Catholic, right? So Christian Catholicism traversed the oceans and reached Brazil, and it was one of the instruments of domination which was used against the indigenous people over here. So this is something that we need to take into consideration, and this doesn't necessarily occur in a peaceful kind of way. Of course not, right? We're talking about colonization, which is always strategies of domination of people over people, and every single tool that the Europeans had to use against the indigenous people were used. So this is to put it mildly. Most of the absurds that took place here in Brazil. So this is 1,500. Um, that was the year, right, where basically this all started. The Portuguese colonization started. We also had a lot of colonies from the Germans, French, Dutch, Italians. A lot of people actually also try to colonize um, the Brazil, right, over the years, but the Portuguese were actually the ones who established the control, right, and this is why we are the only country which speaks Portuguese in Latin America, right? The other countries will speak Spanish, most of them, and we are the only ones who actually speak Portuguese. So why this is interesting? Because it also introduces a barrier, right? Language is a barrier, and this is something that it's fairly peculiar to us. But I'm introducing this point because Catholicism, Christian Catholicism, was crucial um, for the country to establish itself. But more recently, we have renewed evangelical movements, right, which are being pushed forward here in Brazil, and they are changing the Brazilian ethos. So, well, just a couple of elements, right? This is Brazilian demographics. So this is the estimated population from the last census, right? There was a new census which was actually done last year, but the results are not out yet. So there are a couple of elements that we find on different researches. You can find those those informations at Google, right? So this is the estimated population of Brazil and New Zealand, and you can just use it as a comparison, right? Just for you to have an idea of the dimensions which I was talking about earlier, and why it's so difficult just to manage politically and economically such a large population, especially when we do not have the means to do so, right? Because once again, we are a peripheral country in terms of our development. So this is the monthly income and average, right? Just a couple of numbers for us to understand when I'm actually talking about money wise and the monthly income that we have here. Why is this kind of tricky number to deal with? Because we're dealing with averages, and when we're dealing with averages, we kind of obliterate the fact that we don't have a proper distribution amongst the people, right? It's not like everybody gets this average, right? It's actually quite far from it. The disparity between the poorest and the richest here in Brazil can go up to sometimes even 300 times. And this is more and more of a reality here in the country. And basically, Brazil can illustrate what minority elite can actually do when they have so much power in their hands, and the difficulties of having so many people with so very little, right? So this is actually a snapshot of our reality nowadays. A couple of elements concerning religion here in Brazil, right? So like I said before, those are some recent numbers that we have. There is a research which I will show you, which just was published this year, and it also corroborates with those elements, right? But as you can see, right, religions in Brazil, Catholics were always a vast majority, followed by the evangelicals, right? Afro-Brazilian, Umbanda, Candomblé, which are religions that derive directly from our African heritage, are now very, very small um, element to our reality, and that's something which is fairly important, and I will get to that. But it has everything to do with the fact that evangelicals have significant problem with Afro-Brazilian and other religions, because they do introduce clash or problems or struggle against them. So when we are moving to the differences concerning Catholics and evangelicals, we take a closer look at the fact that we have more women than men from the evangelical side. Same thing goes for Catholics, but the difference is significantly smaller. When we take a closer look at ethnicity of between Catholics and evangelicals, what we can say or what we can see, right, is that we do have a majority, which is mixed, that it's significantly similar to one another. So here we don't have a huge difference in comparison between the two religions, right? Oh, and what seems to be important to say, right? Catholics and evangelicals are still a branch of Christianity. Those are different branches, but both are still um, related to Christianity, right? Just to make it clear for those of you who never heard about those different branches, those are different branches from Christianity, right? So ever since the Portuguese put their first feet on Brazil, Christianity was always a part of the country. The only thing that is now changing is that we have this growth of evangelicals, and this is something significant in terms of how it's shaping our culture. So here you can see the ages, right? And what we can start to notice is the fact that we have more evangelicals, which are younger in comparison to Catholics. That's a significant point. In terms of education, right, of those who endeavor towards one branch and the other, still fairly similar. In terms of income, right? So what we can notice from those elements is that we do have a significant amount of poor people which uh, just goes or seek for religion, and this is something that it has everything to do with how religion played this political role in Brazil. It's almost as if it were an extension of the state. Those places where the state could not reach, the religion found a way to grow. So those are more recent numbers, right? This is a research that just came out, and it's a study with 26 different countries, right? And you can see the net percentage of any religion in there. As you can see, Brazil is way above that average, where we are dealing with a vast majority of Christians, right? From any designation of Christianism, but they are there, right? And why is this important? Right? I'm not paying attention to all the other countries. I do apologize for that. I'm just taking a closer look at Brazil right now. But it's a vast majority of people that will introduce to us a couple of information that we need to take into consideration, right? So the first interesting thing is that we got eight. Those are results from this study, right? So 89% believes in God or in a higher power, while 76% follows a religion. So you can actually believe in God without necessarily following a religion. This is something that we find here in Brazil, right? We are way above world average, and this is something which is also significant, right? I mean, we're talking about a vast majority of people that follow a religion in the country. Amongst the Brazilian religious, there are 70% which are Christian from any designation. 5% follow different religions. 20 have no religion, and 5 just choose not to answer. Right. So those are the results that you just saw, and a couple of important elements that this study could introduce to us. Right. The first one is the Gen Z in Brazil, right, up to 23 years old. Right now, they show how there are more young evangelicals than Catholics in the country. This in itself is significantly relevant, right? because it shows that in a few years there is a significant possibility that there will be more evangelicals than Catholics. And this also just substantiates something that we were noticing priorly, which is the shift towards an evangelical country. It's something that will become significantly um, impactful concerning the way that we understand our lives and the way that we portray ourselves as a country, right? Why is that? Because right now we are the largest country, the largest evangelical country there is, but there's something which is still very much different from any other evangelical experience that we witnessed amongst different countries, right? And I will get to that point in a bit. So, a couple of remarks concerning Brazilian history, right? So, Brazil, it's a colonized country. We brutalize our indigenous people, and this left a mark on the way that religion was always a part of all of that without necessarily finding ways to accommodate that same strategy of domination, right? It's not like the Catholic Church found ways to apologize, to give back what was taken from these people, or to remedy all the damage was done, right? And of course, there's no remedy when we're talking about human lives, right? But still, there are a lot of claims which were never took seriously after all that happened. On top of that, the Portuguese colony established here in Brazil used slavery and normalized slavery. So domination is actually a very common part of our history, and this is something that needs to participate in this conversation, in this debate, because this history of normalizing brutality and normalizing um, absurds, it's something that happens quite customarily here in Brazil. So we're talking about a colonized country which used slaves, that normalized slavery for a long period of time, which of course established this brutal structural difference in terms of race, in terms of gender, and in terms of class, right? In terms of wealth distribution. And those are marks that come from the past, and you can still see them in our daily life, in what we call our customary reality nowadays. So those points happen with the help, to a large extent, of religion, because religion plays a part in the political sphere, because it introduces a power, and it introduces a dimension of relationships of power in order to accommodate a lot of the emotions and a lot of the feelings and a lot of what we call humanity to a certain extent across history. So religion was always there to introduce those elements and to uh, also play an agenda for wealthier countries. And Brazil is a good example to what can happen when those things are taken to an extra level, right? So those are also very important elements that we need to consider. how Catholicism was a certain extension of the state, right? So every single place where the state could not reach, religion was there playing a part, and this was fairly common. The way that the indigenous people were colonized by the Portuguese was through religion, right? So turn indigenous people into Catholics, right? Was a way of converting them into uh, basically what they would finally try to call people, right? So this is seriously brutal, right? I mean, it's literally not consider otherness as such, right? So it's just to obliterate otherness and only find sameness or only respecting sameness. And this was something that you can clearly see in the history of the colonization of Brazil. So this extension of the state that Catholicism played here in Brazil happened all the way through colonization, but it was still present at the Penal Code from 1890, which you can still see how they criminalize other beliefs related to magic, spiritism, or healing powers, right? So it's a fairly fair and recent um, penal code, historically speaking, that still criminalize other beliefs, and this was sustained all the way into the Constitution of 1985. So imagine that. Uh, those historical elements that played a significant part of the colonization of the country were still working until the year that I was born. My goodness, I don't feel that much old, but come on, imagine that, right? So the year that I was born was the year that, for instance, those brutal values of domination were just outside or were extinguished from the Constitution. And the fact that they are no longer there doesn't necessarily mean that they gone away, right? So people still live through those elements, or they do sustain it, although it's illegal, right? Or it's not a part of the Constitution anymore. So that being said, there is another crucial element that we need to consider or take into consideration here, which is the fact that even progressive movements in Brazil, right, or those movements which will oppose the establishment were not necessarily secular movements, right? So they would necessarily oppose to a certain group of people the way that they deal with religion, but never religion itself or religion per se. And this is something quite particular to the Brazilian experience, right? Why is that? Because it also shows how here in Brazil we don't necessarily touch on religion. Religion really participates, and it has all those um, um, we don't charge taxes or anything from churches or any religious branch here in Brazil. So we do accommodate for religion, right? But that's the thing. They play a part in the way that we live our lives, and they go pretty much unchecked, I would say, right? And this is not without consequences. Once again, we're not judging people for believing or to having beliefs, but they do participate in our political life, and this is something that we need to pay attention to. So, okay, have you all seen this before? The symbol, is this new to all of you? I will cut this video right here because it's a bit too long, and then I will continue on other follow-ups, okay? But that's the question. Have you ever seen this before?